So I came down all the way from Cleveland, really long way. And so we're going to talk about the most sustainable ways to heat and cool a home. So by show of hands, because everybody needs woken up, I can tell, who here believes that heating and cooling our homes uses energy? Thank you. So that leaves us with a choice. Do we want to use fossil fuel energy or do we want to use renewable energy? And I think everybody here would lean towards the one on the right. So if we are going to talk about powering our homes, heating and cooling them with electricity, with renewables, we are basically talking electricity. We don't really know how to make fossil fuels from that. We do, but it's not great. You can make hydrogen, split water up, but it's not that great. We aren't very efficient at it yet. So what this does instead, if you can just make the electricity and then feed a house, you can go from there. Now, this is a public service announcement. Who here knows that you can get your renewable energy basically for free for your house today? Anybody know this? You can. It's really simple. It's going to take you, well, it's not simple because you have to deal with the utility, but it should take you a half an hour, an hour. So what you do is you Google PUCO, that's Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, and then select your supplier. So you go to residential and then you select AEP, which I think is most of the people here will have that. Then once you get the apples to apples comparison charts, you can see the arrow that I have there for renewable content. You can select that drop down, select 76 to 100%, and then that will pop up the best deals. It's all of the deals. And if you sort it by price, which I did, you can see AEP has 100% renewable energy for 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And I'm betting that 90% of the people in this room are between 5.5 and 6.5. So it's the same price. There really is no cost difference. And putting solar panels on your house is great, but this is something you can do today without all of that rigmarole. And then look at converting to putting solar on your roof down the road. So is everybody okay with doing this in the next week or so? Does everybody promise to go and make this change? This one phone call will probably remove a third to a half of your carbon footprint. One phone call doesn't cost anything. Please do this. All right, if we are going to talk about heating and cooling with electricity, we are talking about heat pumps. Heat pumps, it's complicated and it's simple. A heat pump is just an air conditioner that can run backwards, so it can heat and cool. All it does is change direction of the refrigerant. And another promise that I'd love everybody to make in the room, if you buy an air conditioner for your house, like the whole house air conditioner that goes on top of your furnace, you can get a heat pump model of that for every single one that's out there, and it's $200 to $500 extra. It's a really small incremental cost. So can everybody here promise to never buy an air conditioner again? You're going to buy a heat pump next time? Okay. You just did another number on your carbon footprint. So this is real world. You can do this. All right. Heat pumps are all about moving heat. They are not about making heat. And this is a little bit of a tricky thing to wrap your head around, so I'll walk you through it. So this is my toaster. I finally got this thing all together yesterday, so that's in my kitchen yesterday. And this is what making heat looks like. It's resistance heat. Usually you get a red coil, something warming up. So the red coils there, that's great for making toast, but you don't want to heat your house that way. It uses a lot more energy compared to moving heat. And when it comes to moving heat, this is something that messes people up, because when you think about a heat pump, you're actually taking heat from the outdoor air in the winter, which is not typically particularly warm, and you're actually taking the heat out of that air and you're moving it into the house. So that's what it's doing. It's pumping heat from outside to in. And this seems strange, but your refrigerator in your house is doing that same thing every day. Is it cold inside the fridge? Is it putting off heat? It's the same thing. So there is heat in cold air. It's less as you get lower, but it's still there. And the difference between these is if you are going to make heat with resistance electric versus a heat pump, you're going to use between 2 and 5 times more energy to accomplish the same task. So if we're trying to not make any more electricity than we have to, we definitely want to be talking about moving heat. So there's my conclusion. No, there's a lot more to it. But heat pumps are really the way to go if we want to move to renewably powering our homes. It really is the option. So let's talk about what heat pumps look like in reality. So these are the things you can buy. So you've got ground source, which is also known as geothermal, and then you have air source. So ground source is basically digging a bunch of pipes underneath the ground below your house, and then you pump fluid through it, and you can either add heat to the ground or you can take heat from the ground, depending on the season. An air source heat pump just uses the air. You note it looks just like an air conditioner, only it's on legs, so it can stay out of the snow. As I joke about this one, this is the droid you're looking for. All right. Now, when it comes to ground source, there's a key thing to know about, which is the efficiency between air source and ground source. They used to be way far apart, and now they're getting to where they're like this. So the math has changed just in the last 5 or 10 years. It's a fairly recent change. So it's something you want to be aware of. So let's talk pros and cons, which I'll do for all of these types. So the pros of doing geothermal are that it is more efficient, but like I talked about, it's not as big of a jump anymore. And there is no outdoor unit. So the droid, that doesn't exist with geo. And so if anybody here has been eating dinner outside in the summer and the air conditioner for the neighbor's house or for your house kicks on, and then you have to talk loud over it, and it's kind of annoying, it doesn't have one of those. But on the bad side, they are 2 to 3 times as expensive as an air source heat pump. And we've watched this cause problems for a number of our clients. Also, the tax credit expired at the beginning of this year. So there used to be a 30% tax credit that's gone. Doesn't look like it's coming back. One of the curses that it does is if you put the money into a geo system, you can oftentimes not have enough left over to make the upgrades to make the house comfortable and efficient and healthy and all of those things. You just have to leave the house as is because you burned all of your equity getting that loan. The other problem with it is geo is a fairly specialized thing. So there may only be 2, 3, maybe 5 companies in a whole city that are qualified to work on geothermal. So if you end up not liking the guy you have, you may not have a lot of options, and you can't just pick up the phone if something goes wrong and have somebody come out. And then the last thing is if there's anything that happens with the outside portion where the piping is going under the ground, step 1 is start digging. So you're looking at $1,000 minimum before you really even get going. So repair costs can be high if something goes wrong. And the energy savings can be questionable. My partner made some adjustments to this, and there's slides out of order. So this is an actual example of a client house that has geothermal. And they have a lot of comfort problems in the house, but because they spent about $35,000 on the geo system, they don't have money left to solve the comfort problems in the house. Where if we had done an air source heat pump, which would have been $10,000, $15,000 instead, and then made the upgrades for the same amount of money, we could have given them a comfortable house with comparable or probably lower energy costs for operating the house. So that was a big missed opportunity.
Wouldn't you upgrade those before you put the money into a heating system? Wouldn't you solve the issues in the house before you put a new heating system in?
You should, yeah. You should always start with building shelf first. So you've heard a lot about insulating and air sealing, and that's huge in my world. I actually have what I call the 5 priorities of home performance. The first one is to air seal the house. The second one is to air seal the house. The third one is to air seal the house. Then we insulate it, and then we put the right HVAC in. And it's pretty much always that order with a few exceptions. But yeah, this one's out of order. So they have a messed up house, and they're going to have to wait 3 to 5 years before they can borrow the money to do what they need to do. And that's really kind of a bummer, because for the same money, they could have gotten it done. All right, let's talk about air source heat pumps a little bit. So when I say amazing comfort, one of my clients has a 1918 house. Actually, you're going to see his energy bills and some pictures of his house here a little bit later. I walked into his house, and I'm not saying this because I'm self-promoting. I walked into his house, and I was like, this house is the most comfortable home I've ever been in by an order of magnitude. And the reason is it can trickle heat and cool into the house exactly as much as it needs. So the temperature in that house doesn't do this. It's just flatline. And I actually have graphs that I can show you that house does not move much. So the air source heat pumps can provide the best comfort of anything that I've dealt with. They're obviously cheaper, like we were talking about. Now, when it comes to noise, when you get to the higher end of the air source heat pumps, they are very quiet. So another instance, one of my clients was talking to his neighbor standing about 15 feet away from his outdoor unit, and the neighbor said, so when are you going to turn that thing on? And Paul answered, it's running. So they're very, very quiet. And then obviously you can get just about anybody to work on those units. But on the bad side, air source heat pumps are very much like the battery in your car. So has anybody had a battery fail on them on the coldest day of the year? The car wouldn't start. Okay, so I see 1, 2, 3. Okay, so air source heat pumps have the same problem. As the temperature goes down, it requires more heat, but they put less heat out. Now, there is a solution to that, and we're going to talk about it shortly, but that's one of the problems with them. The other thing is they do have the outdoor unit, so that can be a little bit noisier. All right. Yeah, that totally got messed up. So the ground source heat pumps, where they do make sense and pencil out, if you are honest about the math, which unfortunately almost no one in my world is genuinely honest and tracks to see what happens to the actual energy use after the fact. If you're honest about the math, if you don't have a 5,000 square foot house and up, geo probably doesn't pencil. It just doesn't. If you have a big commercial building like this, geo can actually do fine too, but you need a lot of energy use and a lot of space before the math starts to work. So I'm sorry to beat up on geo, but we've done the math. It's just kind of where it is. All right, so let's talk about air source heat pumps. There's 2 different varieties of these. So on the left is called a mini split. Split just means there's one part of the system inside and there's another part that's outside. So if you have a window air conditioner where it's just the whole thing, that is a single component air conditioner, where when you have something inside the house and outside the house, that's called a split system. So a mini split just has a little head on the wall like that, and a standard split heat pump looks basically like a furnace. So the mini splits, on the inside, they have these wall units. Sometimes they're called wall warts because not everybody likes how they look. They work in just one room generally, or they'll work in an open space. But if you have a closed up space, like 3 bedrooms upstairs, you need one of these for each bedroom to do a good job in general. So it isn't necessarily the best choice, but sometimes it is. So for instance, my house is almost 200 years old. It's really tough to put ductwork in my house, and I don't have it existing. So I'm going to do splits in my house. And the outdoor unit looks very similar to an air conditioner that you see otherwise, only instead of going vertically, you can see the fan is horizontal. This one was also installed incorrectly, which is part of the curse of my world. There's a lot of things that aren't done quite right. That should be 10 inches off the ground to keep it above the snow, and it is now. But when I took this picture, they kind of goofed up the install. So pros and cons. When you're talking about a mini split, you don't need ductwork. They're oftentimes called ductless mini splits. They are very good for big open spaces. So actually a space like this wouldn't be a bad fit. You'd probably need a couple and it would just end up doing the whole space. They also do very well in cold weather because they have some of the most advanced technology, which is now coming into the other ones as well. But the bad parts are, if you think about the healthy home stuff that I get into a lot, that's as you tighten a house, you need to deal with the air inside much more carefully or you can make people sick. Mini splits have really lousy filters on them. Since they don't have a duct, there's no way to bring fresh air into the system, where if you have a ducted system, you can bring fresh air in at the same time. They're not good for a whole house retrofit, and you can't use it to just replace the unit in the basement. So if you already have a furnace or an air conditioner, this is probably not a great solution unless you're talking about, say, a bonus room over a garage that doesn't heat and cool well. That can be a good fit. But you'll see these talked about as kind of a savior in general, and I respectfully disagree. They have their use, but it's not as much as people might think. All right, so there's 2 different varieties of standard split systems as well. So you can either do heat pump only, or you can do a heat pump on top of a furnace, which I alluded to earlier. So let's take a look at the heat pump only. So the indoor unit you already saw, it looks like a furnace. If I didn't tell you otherwise, you probably wouldn't know. And then you've already seen the droid outside. So it's a pretty simple thing. Now, I mentioned earlier that heat pumps lose capacity as the temperature gets colder outside. This is how it gets fixed. So this is a picture of the inside of my oven, but heat pumps have the exact same sort of thing. It's called strip heat or backup heat or emergency heat. There's a bunch of different names for it, but it's all just talking about some resistance electric like that. It uses a lot of energy, but you probably only need it a couple days a year, if that. In watching my clients, I don't think anybody used strip heat this winter. Granted, this winter kind of phoned it in. But you can also stage this in, so if the heat pump is still putting out some power, you can have multiple stages of the resistance heat and add that in, so you can add them together, and that way you aren't using quite as much extra power as if you're just doing straight resistance. And most importantly, which everybody cares about, you are not going to freeze. That's always the question. Like, what's going to happen when it's cold outside and it doesn't keep up?
You're talking about Cleveland, though. 10 inches above is good enough. What happens if snow exceeds?
You should really go out there and shovel around it. Yeah. We never get more than 10 inches in Cleveland. What are you talking about? All right. Heat pump only has some various pros and cons. So the big pro is this will eliminate your carbon footprint for heating and cooling. You're done. As long as you are buying renewable electricity, which I showed you how to do already. You can use this to replace your current HVAC. So your furnace and air conditioner, you can change out for one of these. The comfort can be truly amazing, and it still leaves all of the healthy home options on the table. So you can do really good filtration. You can bring fresh air into the system. You can put a whole house dehumidifier into this, which our climate is gradually getting more and more moist, which means we're going to have more and more moisture problems. And there's three things that kill buildings. There's water, and there's water. That's just what kills them. So you want to keep buildings dry, and it's going to become more and more of a problem as we move forward. So our dew points are already up 5 degrees or thereabouts on average in summers. That's a big deal. And then on the flip side, though, if you're going to do heat pump only, you cannot mess around with this. You pretty much need to do a home performance project. So you're going to need to do blower door testing because you have to figure out how much it actually takes to heat and cool the house, and you need to know with a good degree of accuracy. You can't, like a furnace, you can put a gigantic furnace in and it'll be fine. You can put just about anything in and it'll work. With the heat pumps, they don't have a great deal of output. They're not really big. They don't have a lot of power. So you have to be pretty close to right. And I'll actually show you a client home where we purposely didn't make that work.
When you say home performance project, or an energy audit already done,
It could be. I consider that as part of it. So I should probably back up a second. So what I do, I'm very unusual. I'm a solo consultant. So what I do is I go in, I find out what people want to fix in their house. I help them prioritize those things. We do some testing, and I audit the house to see where the problems are that are causing the things they want to fix. We plan together on what we're going to do. I help them get bids. I help them watch the contractors as the work gets done, and then I do the test out, and then afterwards I do continuous optimization, as we call it, to make sure that we tweak the last couple things to make it as close to perfect as we can. So I found that if you drop the ball at any one of those points, the odds of the project not giving the clients what they want are very high. So we just ended up kind of developing this process. It was accidental. But that's what I consider a home performance project. So from what do you want to fix to testing out that project all the way through. Now, when it comes to the install of heat pumps, where I mentioned a furnace and an air conditioner, you can really screw up an install and it'll still work okay. It won't be great, but it'll be okay. But with a heat pump only, you need to have a thoughtful installer, and you also need to have a good control for that, a good thermostat. This is the easier way. So this is just stacking a heat pump on top of a furnace. So who here has air conditioner in their house, whole house air conditioner, central air? You could have a heat pump today. if you replaced it with, if you replaced your air conditioner with a heat pump. So this is something that anybody can do. And how it works is going to depend on the house, but it's a relatively safe upgrade. And the outside unit looks the same. But it's just it's a heat pump stacked on top of the furnace. So the hybrid systems, yes, you're going to use a lot less fossil fuels. So you may only need to use gas to heat your house once you get below, 30 for some cases. Some houses, if it's good, you might be down to 10, maybe even 5. So you may use almost no fossil fuels. Like I mentioned, you can replace your current air conditioner. You can get good comfort out of this, but it's not always amazing because you're not addressing some root causes if you were just changing HVAC. And you still have all the healthy home options on the table. On the flip side, you are not off of fossil fuels. A lot of heat pumps need some adjustment in how the system works, so you may have to replace the furnace anyway. It may not be a simple swap. And the gas backup, which is the furnace underneath, it can't stage with the heat pump. Either it's the heat pump or it's gas. You can't do both together. So it just switches over at some point. All right. This is a question that I get a lot. Who here thinks that heat pumps cost more to actually operate a house? All right, so I'm going to show you, these are 2 clients. So on the left is Kevin, on the right is John. So Kevin has a furnace, John has a heat pump only. These are about as comparable of homes as I could possibly ask for. So they're built within 3 years of each other. They're within 100 square feet. They both have one guy living there. They're both 2-story houses where we spray foamed the attic. And their blower door leakage is nearly identical. So these are effectively the same house. So this is how much it cost Kevin to run his house from December of 2015 to December of 2016. And this is everything. This is gas and electric. So it's not water, but it's gas and electric. So $1,800. There's John's. So it's not necessarily a ton less. But keep in mind, this is with record low natural gas prices, and we can still make a 1918 house in a very cold climate zone operate for about the same cost. So it's not a massive difference. Now, a big part of this is, I don't know if anybody knows this, but you know how much per month you pay just to have a gas meter attached to your house? Who thinks it's more than $5? More than 10? More than 20? Yep. So we still have, it's usually about $25, give or take. I forget what it is for Columbia, but Dominion's $25. It's $26.18 to be exact. But the key thing is it isn't necessarily more expensive. And it actually gets better because this mild winter, heat pumps perform, they're cheaper to operate than a furnace at higher temperatures. So when you're talking 30s and 40s and 50s, they're actually less expensive to operate. So the spread became $250 as our climate is getting milder. This last winter was just such a joke. I didn't mind it. Seriously, from Cleveland, in heating degree days, which Merle was talking about, we moved to Kentucky. It was that big of a difference. It's just this massive swing. It's really kind of terrifying. So, and yeah, just to repeat, we pulled this off with really low natural gas. So the conclusion is air source heat pumps aren't necessarily more expensive. Now, this is a case-by-case. This is one anecdote. These are some houses that I worked over pretty stinking well. These had big hammers used on them. But what I want to talk about next is taking a step back. So let's talk energy costs moving forward. And Merle, actually, this is kind of funny. Bye, Eric. Thank you. So my prediction is over time, electricity is either going to stay the same or it's going to go down. And the reason is we're making more and more of our electricity with renewables, and they don't have any fuel cost. And it's a technology-based thing. So just like 10 years ago, you had to pay $5,000 for a 50-inch TV, but you have to pay $500 now. These are technology-driven things. So this is just showing, solar panel sales are going up a lot as their prices have fallen precipitously. So they're, about a third of what they were 10 years ago. Now, on the flip side, and actually I wish I had your chart because I was looking for something on Google that went back a lot further. What I often say is, do you think the BP oil spill would have occurred in 5,000 feet of water drilling 18,000 feet down if there were easier places to get it? This is not the Beverly Hillbillies. You can't just go stick a spade in the ground and have oil bubble up. That stuff is gone. We're going to have to work increasingly harder to get this out. So the odds of fossil fuel prices going up are fairly high. But conversely, if you get tired of paying too much for electricity, you can slap solar panels on your roof and you cap what you're going to pay for 20 years. So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself when you're deciding what you want to do with your next HVAC system. And then the second question is, if heat pumps make sense today, what if the math for electricity versus fossil fuels gets better? The last point that I want to make on energy pricing is when you buy a new furnace, you are making a 15 to 20-year commitment to fossil fuels. That's a very uncomfortable realization to come to. And so are you sure that's wise? Are you sure that's what you want to do? And then I have my caveat here. I could be totally wrong. So this is my bet. I think we're going to do heat pump only moving forward. But you have to get the house reasonably tight so that the heat pump has enough power to carry it. It also remains, it's the most sustainable way. So you can do mini splits or you can do heat pump only. But for most houses, if you already have a furnace, this is going to be the better path. But I always wanted to do a slide with just that word on it. If you're going to use a heat pump, I already alluded to this, it's going to require design. So let's look at John's house, because we did this two different ways. So before his attic was done, we purposely waited a year to seal his house and truly insulate the attic. So apologies, Merle. Actually, it's foil-faced Owens Corning fiberglass, but because it was so leaky, so if you can look at the number there, the 4610, that is a very, very leaky house for a little 1,700 square foot house. So between a cold winter and not having that attic done right and not having the house be tightened, he used a ton of electricity. 24,000 kilowatt hours is a big deal. But this last winter, you can see exactly where we came down to. Now, part of it is there's extenuating circumstances. It was a mild winter, but it's exactly half. It was like 49.97% less. It was like somebody was trying to gift me a good number. So 50% less, and like I said, I do have to caveat that the winters were different. So if you are going to do heat pump only, and you're going to get the best performance out of your HVAC system, you're going to have to spend some time designing what you're going to do, upgrading the house, and you have to air seal the house. There is pretty much no way around that. Very, very few houses do I see that don't need air sealing. They do happen, but not much. And the best thing you want to do with this is to find what I call a home performance specialist, which is somebody who can help you from the very beginning of the project all the way to the end so that there aren't any huge failure points through the project. And there's not a lot of them because the business model stinks. It does. Okay, so to end this out, best paths. Everybody's going to convert, right? They're going to go renewable this week. What's that? How about me?
I'm sorry. I had a question on, you're talking about sealing even a 1900 era home. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend, I have a LEED Gold home, but energy recovery ventilators, do you recommend those since you're sealing it so tight?
We're about to touch on that. But actually on that piece of equipment, believe it or not, no. Because there's another piece of equipment that I like better called a ventilating dehumidifier. So an ERV or an HRV, I don't know who here is familiar with those terms. So a handful. Basically, it serves like a radiator in your car. So you bring air in from outside, and then you push air from inside out, and the streams cross, but they don't actually touch. But they transfer some of the energy from one to the other, and that way you don't lose all of the energy in that warmed air. But what we find is the dehumidification, everything that I have done points towards dehumidification being critical. That is the thing to make a house healthy. You have to keep it dry. And to keep it dry, it also has to not leak too much, or else there's humidity from the outdoor air coming in. So all of these things are interrelated. So I'm talking HVAC mostly here, but it's extremely holistic what I do. So I would rather have a ventilating dehumidifier that brings in unconditioned outside air. It filters it, it dehumidifies it, and then that's also a dehumidifier for the whole house. The reason for that is those are usually about $3,000, $3,000 to $4,000, and a good ERV, HRV is also about $3,000 or $4,000. So I'm usually not going to have a double budget. If I do, we'll do both. But if I have to pick one, if you put a gun to my head, ventilating dehumidifier, any place who has wet climate. Yep. Ultra Air is the main brand. That they're made by a company called Thermastore. And I am sorry, I'm not meaning to promote. It's just they're really the only ones that make that. So first off, you got to switch your supply. When it comes to the process of making a house better so that you can go heat pump only if you want, this is the process. I kind of mentioned it. You have to list your problems, figure out what your budget is, diagnose the problems, what the house needs to solve those problems that you want to solve, develop a plan. And I didn't touch much about load calculations, but a load calculation is part of an energy modeling tool. An energy model is basically a big spreadsheet of how your house uses energy, and then you can change various things in and out. And one of the other things you get out of it is a load calculation, which tells you how much it takes to heat or cool your house at very hot and very cold temperatures for your specific climate. So I don't know Columbus, but in Cleveland, we designed to 88 degrees in summer and 5 degrees in winter. So we have to be able to handle that range. But the load calcs are super important when you're using heat pumps. Then you do whatever you need to fix the house. You install your heat pump or hybrid system, and then you tweak it to perfection. So what I end up doing in my practice is I'm basically adding knobs to your house that I can twist. And then I like to play with it. Let's turn it down to 1. And then the other way, I love knobs that go to 11. So you turn it to 11. And you see what the house is capable of on the high end and the low end. And then you find where the in the middle is where you're happy. So it's a fairly involved process to get them just right. But once you get this done and you have a good control, it's automated. You set the thermostat. You don't think about it ever again. All you have to do is change filters. So there's, I don't know if anybody plays around, like my friends last night, the upstairs got a little bit warm, so we kicked the air conditioner on at like 11 p.m. You wouldn't do that. You just leave it on all the time, and then you'd have fresh air system coming in. So I meant for this to be kind of a flow chart, and it didn't work out very well. But just to review, so heat pumps, you've got ground source, air source, mini split versus standard split, and then hybrid and heat pump only. And I highlighted the two that are all electric and that I like the best. So if you're going to do one of those two options, so if you're going to do hybrid, you're going to keep your furnace, replace your air conditioner like we talked about. You can do it to any house that has forced air. You're still using fossil fuels, and you still have a long-term commitment to fossil fuels. If you go heat pump only, it's by far the most sustainable design. If you don't do design, you're not going to know how much it's going to use, so you could use twice as much power like John did, and you don't want that. That could sink you. He got $400 electric bills that winter, and he about croaked. I got phone calls. I'm like, look, we talked about this. We decided we were going to push this back. I know. He was freaking out. You're pretty much going to have to do some form of home performance project. And then the last thing to talk about is don't forget to design for a healthy home. It's also known as indoor air quality. So you need to keep those things in mind. You need to provide fresh air to a house. Houses don't have to breathe, but people do, as do furnaces. Although the beautiful thing about going heat pump only is all the combustion safety stuff that was being talked about earlier, you don't have to do it. And I hate combustion safety work. It's stupid. It's a waste of my time. I want to go fix something, not try and deal with what's there. You want to filter the air, and you want to control humidity, both dehumidification in summer and humidification in winter, if needed. And if you want to know anything more about those two particular houses, I have extremely in-depth case studies on my website, and some 1915 and the 1918. And if you want So I'm in the middle of writing a book about home performance, so I can teach people and bring them up to speed on this. If you want the HVAC chapter, just come see me, give me your email, and I'll send it to you. Thank you for staying over, everybody. Yeah, we're hungry. Jamie?
Yeah, so you're building a house as opposed to renovating a house. What would you suggest as far as an HVAC system at that point?
Heat pump only, baby.
Let me rephrase that. Air source standard ducted or vented?
Air source ducted, because then you can tackle whole house filtration, whole house humidification, dehumidification, and fresh air all with one system.
Not, and that's, going to our next presentation, and thank you for Our next speaker is Dr. Victoria Tim, and she's going to talk about energy efficient appliance.